It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up, and it's time to talk all things tariffs. How about that? It is time to wake up. It's time to let's talk about it. Call your mama them, call your cousin them. Everybody get on. Let's talk about it. We have a lot of talking heads who are putting out a lot of information about this tariffs, a lot of fear mongering, because guess what? Fear sells, and most of you are buying it. One of the first lessons I learned is that people are only willing to sell what you are willing to buy. So if you're not buying it, they won't sell it. Most of you are buying up the fear right now. So as a result, I am predicting we're going to continue to see a lot of people selling fear about the tariffs, about what does it mean for the United States? What does it mean for your 401k? What does it mean with geopolitics? But I wanted to, let's just calm down for a minute. And let's talk about this. And I could think of no better person to help me talk about these tariffs than my good friend, Rich Lowrie. Is Rich on right now?
Come
Yes,
on,
Rich.
Kathy.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How about you?
I am doing well, my friend. So, Rich Lowrie, he is president and chief investment officer at Park Edge Capital, and he was the economic advisor to the late, great Herman Cain. He was also my advisor when I ran against Dr. Oz, here in the great state of Pennsylvania. An incredibly smart man. You're always on point, Rich. I mean, you were telling me things that were going to happen, what the Fed was going to do before they did it. And, that's a great way to know that someone actually knows what they're talking about.
Well, it's good to be with you, Kathy.
Yeah. Okay. So listen, let's just jump right in. Donald Trump said earlier this week, April 2nd, is Liberation Day, that we're free. We're free. It doesn't feel like we're free if you're listening to the talking heads and all the media, quote unquote, experts, all the social media experts, even those on the conservative side. And when you're looking at the stock market, people, the short term pain that people are feeling is very real. You and I were talking last night. We were talking about the fourth turning. We were talking about, these Trump tariffs. And the reality is, I wish foreign policy could be please and thank you. That we say please, they say thank you, and we all work together and go and walk off into the sunset. But unfortunately, foreign policies isn't please and thank you, and that some really tough decisions have to be made. I think we've kicked the can down the road as far as the American people can kick the can down the road. And we have to make some tough changes. I characterized this earlier as Donald Trump kind of juggling knives and while walking on a tightrope. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but there's a lot of things that can go right as well. So I'm a pause right there, Rich, and just kind of toss it over to you for a moment.
Well, yeah, I think there's going to be pain before there are going to be gains, and the president has telegraphed this loud and clear for quite a while. The market reaction indicates that most people thought he was bluffing, that he's just going to talk a big game, but when push came to shove, he would, not implement the tariffs or reverse them. But I think if you take him at his word, they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. Doge is doing exactly what they said they're going to do. And you basically have had this K-shaped economy, meaning the top 10 has been doing great. The asset holders have been doing great. Where you've had this government-dominated, stimulus, government-dominated economy, where the stimulus helps the top 10 and not the bottom 90. And that's been going on, according to my work, at least till 2000. But if you want to roll it back farther, 1971. During the 70s, we reached equality, but it was equality of misery. Coming out of the 80s and 90s, the bottom 90% income grew. It peaked in 2000. And it's declined since then. It hasn't recovered. So, there's no surprise that we elected a bull in a china shop to try to fix this K-shaped economy. And it's going to mean major restructuring. You mentioned the fourth turning, and if your listeners aren't familiar, Neil Howe.
It's a really great book. Yeah.
He is a demographer, and he studied cycles over hundreds of years all over the world, and has identified a pattern that he ties to demographics, where you have four turnings, and each turning represents a new generation kind of coming to power. And all four turnings span roughly the equivalent of, a human life. And in 1997, when his book came out, that was the book that he coined the term millennial. And in 1997, he said, 2008, we are going to begin the fourth turning. The first turning is where you come out of some crisis. The Revolutionary War was a fourth turning. The Civil War was a fourth turning. World War I into World War II was a fourth turning. And now this is a fourth turning. So coming out of a fourth turning, you get new leadership, you get new institutions, you have a period of prosperity, you have peace, you have, it's all good. Then you get into the second turning. And then by the third turning, things kind of, get a little long in the tooth. And the fourth turning is where these institutions get replaced, they get shut down. And just think of every institution that came out of the post-World War II period.
The IMF.
Yeah, all of it. How much has their focus drifted? I mean, they all started out doing one thing. And then like a fungus, they get tentacles into every other thing, and there's no resemblance to what they were originally formed to do. And, this is kind of, where we're at. So it doesn't surprise me that, and I don't really think a 10% decline bothers the administration. In fact, if you took all the tariffs off the table, let's just say that we were going back, 6 months ago, and you're looking into 2025, and aside from, any government policy, if you said, what's the number one risk going into 2025, it would be the enormous amount of debt that the Treasury has.
And I want to talk about that also. So let's just put a pause there, because you're going to be with me for a minute. So we're going to have a time to kind of unravel a lot of these things that you're talking about. But let's go back and double click on a couple of things that you just said. So in this book called The Fourth Turning, it is an amazing book. I think both of them are Harvard professors. One has since passed, but they wrote this book back in the 1990s, and they look at, I think it was a history of over 1,000 years of history. And what they say is that every 100 years you have about 4 to 5 turnings, and each turning lasts about 20 years, right? And like you said, we started this fourth turning in 2008. So 2008 plus 20 years, we're at the end of this fourth turning. And it's at the end of the fourth turning that all literal hell breaks loose in every society over the past 1,000 years. And I know that people today think that this time is different, that somehow we're more special than all the generations who have come before us. But guess what? We're not. And so in this 100-year period, this saculum that you and I are living in, we've had the silent generation. These are the people who are probably in their 90s right now. They are the children of the World War II adults. And the silent generation gave birth to the boomers. The boomers gave birth to the X generation. The X generation gave birth to the millennials. And now you have one of the latest generations, the Gen Z. But it's in this fourth turning where every nation over the past 1,000 years have to look themselves in the mirror. We've kicked the can down the road as far as we could kick the can down. We've sold off almost everything that is important in America. The middle class has been decimated. The bottom class, the door has been slammed on them. And the only one who's really benefiting are the top 1% of the nation and the world, and those who live on the coast. But everyone in the middle of this country, just putting the spotlight on America, it is devastation. It's death by despair right now. And we've kicked the can down the road as far as we can kick it. Now, Trump could come in, continue to kick the can down the road. We're at the end of this. We're like 3 years out from the end of this fourth turning. And either we survive as a nation or we go the way of every other great nation, the Babylonians, the Persians, Romans, and we just kind of fade off into black, which is what I believe we were on the trajectory to do. Or, according to this book, you either go the way of Rome or a disruptor comes into office. And I think Trump is that disruptor. What do you say?
Oh, for sure. And if it wasn't Trump, it would be somebody else. I mean, we're at the point where all these major institutions have lost their focus. They've lost the trust and confidence of the people. I mean, go back to 2008. So in 97, Neil Howe said this is going to begin roughly 2008. He was pretty close to being on the mark.
Yeah.
But think about what that was. That was a toxic cocktail of government intervention that caused imbalances and instability, and it became, combustible. You could trace all the major factors of 2008 back to a government policy that caused.
So what happened in 2008? What happened in 2008?
Well, I mean, most people will think of that as the financial crisis, the real estate crisis, the Lehman failure, et cetera. But it was government policy that set that up. It was the government that mandated that banks had to lend to people with low credit scores because of diversity.
Right. And then we had the Enrons that came out of that, all of that. It was just a hot mess, but that was the beginning.
Enron was before that. That was, 2002, I think. So the government forced banks to make bad loans. Banks didn't want to hold bad loans. So Bear Stearns figured out a way to package these together and, come up with a tiering system for paying out the cash flows. That opened the floodgates for the banks to make these loans and dish them off to Wall Street. You had some Sharpies that, gamed the system. The regular rating agencies were asleep at the switch. Fannie Mae decided, hey, our new mission, talk about mission creep, our new mission is to expand affordable housing. And there was an environment where every con artist descended into the mortgage business because they knew they could make any loan and dish it off to Fannie Mae. They could get a cut out of it and they could dish it off to Fannie Mae.
And this was the beginning of the fourth turning, this where all of these institutions, like you said, get long in the tooth. Now they're creating their mission statements. And now we find ourselves today where USAID is sending $50 million for condoms. I'm sorry?
Well, look at the government response to 2008. I think that was the beginning of the end. We had massive bailouts. And there's nothing wrong with a bad actor going out of business.
Right. Hey, hold that thought right there, Rich. We're coming up against a break. We'll be right back. Okay. You guys are listening to the Kathy Barnette Show on the #1 talk radio station, 1210. See you on the other side. Hey, yeah. Hey. Hey, Pennsylvania. How y'all doing? It is me, your girl, Kathy Barnette, 1210 WPHC, the #1 talk radio station in Pennsylvania, covering most of the mid-Atlantic states, so including Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. So how y'all doing out there? And on air with me right now is my good friend, Rich Lowrie. He is the president and chief investment officer at Park Edge Capital. And Rich was the economic advisor to the late, great Herman Cain when he ran for president. Remember Herman Cain came out with that 999 program? No one can say it, Rich, quite like Herman said it, but
That's true.
yes, very true. So when we went out of the last break, right before we went to the break, we were talking about, just want to put a pin on this, where we are right now as a nation, and the fact that we have a disruptor in office was all predicted in a book called The Fourth Turning. Y'all should go read it. It's not a thin book because it's history, but it's history, it's facts, and it's kind of allowing you to see over the past 1,000 years, this is how human behavior evolves into four turnings. This is the fourth turning. So it predicted back in the late 1990s that some disruptive individual would either come in office or the nation will go by the way of Rome and Persia and every Babylon and every other great nation. So right now, Donald Trump came forward earlier this week talking about Liberation Day. It is time to free the nation by way of tariffs. I'm going to pitch it back over to you, Rich.
All right, so speaking of history, let me give you a quick history. Right after World War II, we came up with the Bretton Woods monetary system. That was a first turning, instance. It required the government to stabilize the dollar. Basically, it was backed by, which gave this, value to the account. Bottom 90% income went up 86% in the next 23 years. That was on par with top 10% income, which went up about the same. That was the rising tide lifts all boats. That was the golden age of the middle class, no pun intended. That was you work hard, you get ahead. And in the second turning, they broke the link. You had Lyndon Johnson that wanted to spend money like a drunken sailor. And went ahead and essentially violated Bretton Woods, and then Nixon broke the link in '71. Both the top 10 and the bottom 90 suffered together in the '70s, and then throughout the '80s and '90s, you had Fed governors who said, "Well, we don't have an explicit mandate to link the dollar to anything. But we do know that the economy just performs better if the unit of measure is stable." So you had guys like Manley Johnson, who is vice chair under Volcker. I think the most underrated Fed governor we've ever had, probably the best Fed governor we've ever had, in my opinion, along with guys like Wayne Angell, who looked at, among other things, commodity prices, foreign exchange rate, gold, et cetera, and said, our job, the best we can, in the absence of an explicit, is to try to keep the dollar stable. And what you had was 20 years of prosperity where the bottom 90% income grew and peaked in 2000. Now there was a transition going on. This is the third turning where academics took over the Fed. And guys that viewed the Fed's role as being primarily one thing, to stabilize the dollar, were rotating off the board, and President Clinton put pure academics in, like Janet Yellen, Alan Blinder, and Janet Yellen in her Senate confirmation hearing actually said the lesson of the '70s is that we can never let a wage price spiral engage again. Now, there may be many lessons from the '70s, but that certainly is not one of them, to blame labor for the inflation of the '70s. And since then, thanks to the Phillips curve and other theories. I call them superstitions, but they actually think that when too many people are working and getting a raise, that is going to start an inflation cycle because companies are going to have to raise prices to cover the increased wage. Now, never mind that labor is a lagging indicator, so is inflation. But nonetheless, the Fed became dominated by academics who are under the superstition of the Phillips curve. And what that meant is that anytime wage growth was strong, you could count on the Fed to reliably tighten the economy to intentionally get the unemployment rate up enough to offset whatever wage gains we had. So from 2000 to the present, bottom 90% income still hasn't recovered. Now, if you have that much stagnation for that many people,
one moment. Let me pause you for a moment because I know you're giving a lot of good information, and you and I have spent so many years talking about this that I'm tracking you perfectly. But what I want people to understand, a couple of things that you said. Coming out of World War II, we had the Bretton Woods Agreement. We had the dollar was tied to a commodity to stabilize it. That commodity was gold.
Gold.
And as a result, you see it's on a graph. You showed it to me. It was a rising tide that lift all boats. The top 10% did well, but guess what? The bottom 90% was also doing well. We were all tracking together. If I had a bad day, then the top 10% had a bad day too. So we were all incentivized to work together. But then something happened that broke that link, and that was the decoupling of the dollar to gold, right? Or to this stable basket.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Fed governor, and your job is to stabilize the dollar, you're going to be looking in the direction of commodity prices, gold prices, the shape of the yield curve, foreign exchange rates, et cetera. You are not going to be looking at labor markets, how many people are working, how many people are getting a raise. You're not going to look at any of that. You're going to look at market prices.
Because during the past, I don't know, 20 plus years of my adult life, our Federal Reserve has been looking at how many people are working. And you predicted this before it happened, and I saw it. And when it happened, they were talking about too many people are working. So now we got to cool it.
If you wanted to stabilize the dollar, the Fed should have acted aggressively February of 2021. And when we talked back then, I said they're not going to do anything until wages start going up. Then they're going to get aggressive.
Because when wages go up, now people like, the middle class and the bottom portion of our economy, their wages go up. Everybody feels like, okay, well, I have some money I can spend. I'm so very grateful. But to the Federal Reserve, the way it's been working the past 20 years, when they see people wages increase, they're like, oh, well, it's about to get hot. People are going to spend too much. It's going to cause inflation. So we got to go in and we have to stymie or to put a wet blanket over that enthusiasm. And so I want to pause there and now pivot to Donald Trump's and this and these tariffs, because again, like I said at the very opening, we've kicked the can down the road as far as we could kick it. And who said it? Albert Einstein. What is the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. It's not what we've been doing is not working. Something has to change. And if you're a student of history, specifically reading the book Fourth Turning and everything that accompanies it, you realize America is on a ticking time clock. Something has to change, and a disruptor will be the only one who would change it. Now enters Donald Trump, these tariffs. Everyone's losing their mind. Let's talk through the rationale or the probable thinking of Donald Trump right now of issuing these tariffs.
Let me just close out one thought on the income stagnation part.
Okay.
First of all, it's been bipartisan. You had 2 terms of George W. Bush, you had 2 terms of Obama. You did have a brief run where when in Trump's first term, the dollar was stable. We got some tax cuts and bottom 90 income went up the most during that 20 plus year run. But when you have that much stagnation for that many people for that long, it undermines confidence in free enterprise. First of all, that's not a system of free enterprise to have a Fed think that wage growth is a bad thing. But that is the underlying conditions where people just lose, confidence in government. And because it's, bipartisan malpractice, you need an outsider, to change it. So
Right.
with the tariffs, he's trying to level imbalances in international trade. These have been decades in the making. Not many people realize it, but the problem originates actually in the tax code.
Yes. And so
The way our tax code is set up, which is on par with a third world country, is that imports arrive into the U.S. tax-free and they compete with domestic goods that are heavily taxed.
I'm going to put a pause right there because we're getting ready to go on a break. When we come back, I want to pick up and talk about the tariffs. This isn't rocket science. It's not going to take forever to see what Donald Trump is betting on. And if it works, the bottom 90%, our boat will begin to rise again. So hold on. You're listening to Kathy Barnette on the Kathy Barnette Show with my friend Rich Lowrie, President and Chief Investment Officer at Park Edge Capital. See you on the other side.
Yeah. Let me hear you say, oh.
Yes. How you doing, Pennsylvania? You're listening to Kathy Barnette. Yes.
I can't do it. No
I can't do trouble no more. We got to change. We got to change some things, y'all.
Won't do it no
And we can't. We're in trouble. I don't know if y'all have realized this or not. Many people have not. And you think we can keep kicking the can down the road. We can't. We're in trouble. And here comes the disruptor, Donald Trump. And it's going to be some pain. We need to get real specific now, Rich. My good friend Rich Lowrie is on the line with me. He is President and Chief Investment Officer at Park Edge Capital and the economic advisor to the late, great Herman Cain. And you were also my economic advisor when I ran in the Senate against Dr. Oz and many others. So let's get real clear on these tariffs and what the bet Trump is making, because coming from Bretton Woods, the World War II, America has been setting the rules of engagement across the world. And now in these waning hours of our preeminence in the world, Donald Trump is using the leverage of this country to rewrite the order of things. This is not some small move. He is literally changing the world economic way of doing things. So this is really huge. What is he betting on?
Well, he believes as if other countries have been taking advantage of the U.S. And when it comes to trade, we have to be careful in that there's nothing wrong with international trade. As long as it happens on a level playing field. There are some countries that have certain products that are better than what we could make in the U.S. Whether it's imported coffee or French wine or, there are any number of reasons why we should import. The issue that we've had is that it hasn't been on a level playing field. That originates in the tax code, where imports come in tax-free and they make life difficult for domestic goods. That is a playing field that's tilted against our own interests, and it's totally self-inflicted. And meanwhile, exports leave with the burden of the U.S. tax code embedded in the cost structure, and they face typically a value-added tax
when they arrive on the shore of some of these other countries.
Exactly. So that That's a trading a playing field that is also tilted against her own interests and totally self-inflicted.
And it
Now,
hasn't been
Trump,
fair. And as a result, the American people, and specifically the middle class, has been subsidizing the world. We have been bringing world nations out of poverty while simultaneously digging a hole for ourselves. And so now we have the tariff. And I think the tariff is bigger than just a tariff. I think this is much bigger in scope. Let's talk real quick about the debt that is looming. We have $9.2 trillion of national debt that has to be refinanced between January of this year and June. About 70% of that 9.2 trillion has to be refinanced before June. And then you add to that about a nation that's running a $2 trillion national debt deficit every year. So we have about $11 to $12 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced in some fashion before June. And walk us through very quickly, because this is the last break that we have here. Walk us through very quickly what Donald Trump is betting.
Well, I think if you look at the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, he's on record as criticizing Janet Yellen rightfully for trying to finance those deficits by issuing short-term T-bills. That just means you have those T-bills you have to roll over next quarter in addition to the deficit. And then, you keep accumulating how much debt you have to finance if you're just doing it short term. He criticized her for kicking the can down the road. I would fully expect that he's going to look for a way to term out the debt, to sell 7-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year debt to lock in the finances. That would be the prudent.
Well, why couldn't Donald Trump do this without the tariffs? What is so specifically unique about Donald Trump disrupting manufacturing confidence that is creating an open window for our country not to go into default?
Well, I think the Treasury Secretary, has said he would like to see long-term interest rates come down, that is a more useful barometer than the Fed funds rate. Trump has barely said anything about Jerome Powell and the Fed. They're more focused on long-term interest rates. And the most surefire way to get long-term interest rates down is to rattle the cage of the stock market.
And isn't that what we've been experiencing? So capital is fleeing the stock market. And where do these people put that money? Do they put that money in their mattress, or do they now create an opportunity for Bessent to walk out and to refinance roughly $11 trillion of debt?
Yeah, and if you think the normal buyers of treasuries, the reason this is so important is that you just have a supply-demand imbalance. You have a massive, massive supply of treasuries that's going to hit the market. And on the demand side, all the big usual buyers are not there. The Fed is not buying. In fact, they're selling. Foreign central banks are not buying. Commercial banks are not buying. They're up to their eyeballs in underwater bonds from pre-COVID. And it's up to private sector buyers to take up the slack. And private sector buyers buy because they want to, not because they have to. And there just isn't enough demand, or hasn't been enough demand. And we saw that under the last administration when Yellen tried to, follow a normal course of treasury issuance. Stocks sold off more than 10%, bonds got hammered, commodities got hammered. And since then, they said, all right, we don't want to do that. We're just going to kick the can down the road and keep rolling T-bills. Now you have this massive pile that Bessent has inherited. And the Fed printing money to come in and be a big buyer of bonds, or foreign central banks doing that. You need to increase demand for treasuries because there's a limit on how much you can reduce the supply. And the number one way to do that is in a stock market correction where people get out of stocks and look to treasuries for safety.
Okay, so
I don't think they're worried about the stock market sell-off. They're saying, okay, well, as long as treasury yields are the 10-year treasury is under 4%, we have an opportunity to term out some of this debt. And that's really what needs to happen.
It is. So let's just put a pin here because I want to move to the other two things that are happening. So one, I want everyone to understand, right? Yes, Donald Trump is juggling knives while walking on a tightrope. There's a lot that could go wrong, but if he makes it to the other side, and by he, I mean we as America, as Americans, if we make it to the other side, and the other side being less than 15 months from now, July 2026, right? So he's betting, and he's been very clear. I don't think people are paying attention, but he's been very clear in signaling exactly where he's going. And so one, we have roughly 11 to 12 trillion dollars of debt that has to be refinanced. As Rich has walked us through, there's just not a lot of buyers out there because they can make greater returns on their money in the stock market. So how do you force people? How do you create a market for your T-bills so that you can refinance? Well, one way is by creating turbulence, i.e. manufacturing uncertainties. Where are people going to get the necessary products for their companies to sell? And you see it happening in real time. Capital is flowing out of the stock market, and now they're looking for someplace else that's safe to put their money. Enter Scott Bessent, Secretary Bessent. So that's point number one. This has to happen, people. That 11 to 12 trillion dollars, that is real. That is happening. I don't care about your emotions, nor does the money. So one, we got to find people to actually do this. Now, secondly, and we're going to go to a quick break, come back. But secondly, let's talk about the reinvestment, because the tariff serves as a weapon. This reinvestment, this reindustrialization. We had one industrialization revolution. Now we're entering into a second one, I think. So, Rich, hold on. We're going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to come back. And I want to talk about this, another gamble, reinvestments back into this country to build manufacturing facilities. I'll see you on the other side.
From Broomall to Blackwood, we know your favorite station is Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
Hit the road.
Woo!
So I won't take it.
Let me tell y'all something. You're going to have a lot of heartaches if this doesn't work. I know most of us are looking at our wallets today, our 401k today. We don't care about our grandkids. We care about them, but whatever, right? Let's kick the can down the road. Listen, you done kicked it as far as it can go. So if we don't fix this right now, it's a wrap. I know that's really hard for us because every day is like a sunny day, and we've been trained to think every day is going to continue to be a sunny day. I'm here to tell you that's not the case, and we have to do better. We only have a couple of minutes. Rich, let me bring you back in. Rich is the president and chief investment officer at Park Edge Capital. Rich, so let's close this out real quick. One reason that it's a lot of betting going on. It's a lot of hoping and a praying, but I believe is the foundation of what Trump is doing is logical. One, create manufacturing uncertainty that shifts capital out of the stock market so that we can refinance our 11 to 12 trillion dollars of debt. That must happen. I know your 401k is hurting, so is mine, but this must happen, right? Or else all of it, including your 401k, goes down the tube. The next thing, Rich, talk to us very quickly about the other aspect that Donald Trump is betting on, and that these tariffs will force investors to invest back in America.
Yeah, well, he's looking at it. That'll come on two counts. So let's just, come up with a product, say widgets. And he's going to put a tariff on imported widgets, which is going to increase the demand for domestic widgets. Initially, that's going to be disruptive in that you have this outside influence that increases demand for domestic widgets, while domestic manufacturers haven't yet had a chance to ramp up production of them. So that's going to be a little bit disruptive, an increase in domestic production of widgets.
I don't know if people followed on the on the production of widgets, but because we're running out of time, just very succinctly about the reinvestment. One of the things I heard from Lutnick is that Commerce Secretary Lutnick is that for every $1 trillion that we can get investors to invest in America, our GDP raises by roughly $300 billion. Right now, Donald Trump said we have about $5 trillion of people who have said they're going to reinvest in America. That's $1.5 trillion in GDP growth. GDP growth means you, me, and everybody else.
I agree with him. I think his numbers are low. If you look at every dollar of business investment. So, as investors, we're putting up liquid financial capital. Companies then turn that into illiquid physical capital when they expand plant, equipment, factories, et cetera. Every dollar of business investment generates 45 cents of GDP. It is the only thing that makes the economy run and grow. So to the extent that this does lead to a pickup of investment, there will be economic growth, that comes from it.
Yeah, you and I, our house, our car, when we go to grocery store, how much money we bring home, what kind of roads we have, what kind of technology, all of that is GDP. And so if we can get investors to invest in manufacturing and building and other things here in America, and according to the administration, there's about $5 trillion that's been kind of set aside for reinvesting back into America. That's a GDP rise of $1.5 trillion, and that's on the low end, according to Rich. And so that's a good thing. Last benefit of what these tariffs are doing is, and not so much tariff, but it's coupled with Doge. Doge is on track, according to Elon Musk, of eliminating $1 billion of fraud and waste every single day. That's $7 billion every single week. His projection is by July of next year, he would have eliminated $1 trillion out of the $2 trillion national deficit we're running. Talk about that real quick.
Well, yeah, I think that, first of all, it's amazing that they're able to cut anything. I mean, think of every administration we've had. They all talk about the same thing, but nobody does anything. And it's amazing how they've dug in and, tying that back to the Treasury issuance. If markets have confidence that peak deficits are behind us, that's going to take a lot of risk out of refinancing all these treasuries. Now, the one thing I will say is, let's just assume that everything the administration does leads to more growth and prosperity. We still have the problem that the Federal Reserve is going to wait until wage growth increases again before they stamp it out. So we need people like Judy Shelton to get nominated to the Fed board. The administration can do everything it wants to do to generate growth, but the Fed is always going to be there to stamp it out.
So we have problems.
So,
I mean, like, not only the Fed, right? I mean, so you're right. We have problems not only with the Fed, but with Democrats, with some Republicans. So that means you and I, people, we got to stay vigilant. We got to stay in the fight. Donald Trump is doing his part. We have to come alongside and do our part. We got to hold these people accountable, show up at the polls, get them elected, be a thorn in their side. You've been listening to Kathy Barnette, my good friend Rich Lowrie, the president and chief investment officer at Park Edge Capital. Go find me on YouTube at Kathy for Truth. Subscribe, hit the notification button. Go to Twitter. I'm out there all the time, unfortunately. Rich, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
Okay, blessings, everyone. See y'all next week.